Thank you for inviting me back. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Amen. On the march over here, we learned, especially if you were toward the front row, you learned loud and clear about Adam and Noah and Job and Jesus and Muhammad and Abraham. Peace and blessing upon them all. One thing that none of them were interested in is being venerated. Not Muhammad, not Jesus, none of them did their work, said their words in order to receive our praise. Instead, what they were interested in is in raising us up, in having us see what they saw, perceive what they perceived. They were not interested in us bowing down to them. They were interested in us reaching up to their hand and being drawn up to do what they do, to see what they see. I would like to speak to you today. I would like to tell you a story about something that touches the very core of my being. Diane mentioned in her talk about sharing our favorite verses or sharing a portion of our faith with one another, and that in turn helps us to genuinely love one another. And so I'd like to tell you a story, but it's a story that we all have in common. You just may not know it yet. It regards the Hubble telescope. Any of you who have been on the internet have seen some of the photos, typically from the NASA website, which have some of the gorgeous photos that the telescope has taken. One thing you may not be aware of is in 1995, an event took place that produced an image which has begun to shake the world. The Hubble telescope is a very tightly controlled instrument, and so astronomers all across the globe use it in a very tightly programmed way. So when you have a project, you are an astronomy professor, for example, and you have a project that needs the telescope, you need to book time on it. And it is very expensive and it is very precious. In 1995, a group of astronomers had a project that they wanted to use this telescope for 10 days. And at the last minute, something went wrong and they weren't able to use it. So NASA contracted with astronomers all across the globe, saying, with being a little bit chagrined, we have 10 days unaccounted for. Do any of you have projects that you would like to use this telescope for 10 days? A group of astronomers, 2 to 3 astronomers at SUNY Stony Brook out on Long Island, won the ability to use the telescope for that unaccounted for 10 days. They said that there is a spot in the sky. It's right near the Big Dipper. If you look at where the handle of the Big Dipper joins the pot of the dipper, it's right above that. They said that there's a spot there that is unusually black. If you look at it with your naked eye, it's just, there's nothing there. If you look at it with binoculars, there's nothing there. If you look at it with a reasonably decent microscope, there's still nothing there. And they wanted the best microscope in the world, telescope in the world, to look at it for 10 days straight. A time-lapse photograph. This is a spot in the sky that is a size of a quarter at 100 yards away. So you folks in the back, you're not quite 100 yards away. I would say that it's getting close though. You can get a feel for how big of a spot this is in the sky. Not very big at all. And so they looked at it, and what did they see? 2 stars and over 3,000 galaxies. This was upsetting. It was surprising. It was moving. And so they repeated it again in 2003. You might remember in the news that between 1995 and 2003, the Hubble got a new pair of glasses, is the way they worded it in the paper. In other words, corrections were made to the telescope to make it see more clearly. Also, it was given new lenses and filters that would get rid of some of the extraneous light and allow it to see more clearly. And they looked at a different patch of sky for 11 days. And in that case, they saw over 10,000 galaxies in a spot of sky the size of a quarter, 100 yards away. If you study the 99 beautiful names of God, you might come across Al-Baqi or Al-Kabir, the everlasting one, Allah the great, the infinite. Or if you look in the Hebrew scriptures, particularly in the book of Ecclesiastes, you will come across a phrase that uses a particular word that is important. In English, the verse is this: "Thou hast put eternity into the heart of man, that he may, yet so that he may not know what God has done from the beginning to the end." However, if you are concerned with the Hebrew, the actual words underneath the English version of it, that word translated eternity is the Hebrew word olam. Olam is not easily translated into English. It can mean eternity. It can also mean infinity. It's translated as the world, the cosmos. It is a word that basically has in it Einsteinian space-time. All of it, the whole shebang. And there it's translated as eternity. Not bad, but that's not all it means. But then also, continuing down a few more words in that verse, where it says that God has put olam into our heart, there it's nephesh, which means actually soul. Heart isn't a bad translation, but soul is better. What I am trying to say to you in this roundabout way with my imperfect words is that when you look up in the sky and you consider that even in a tiny little spot, there are 3,000 galaxies or maybe 10,000 galaxies, and each one of those galaxies has 500,000 million. Stop for a moment and consider that. 10 to the 11th stars in each one. And we attempt to say, yes, God is great. Do you have a feel for how pitiful, how anemic that is? To say God is great, but it's the best we can do. What we have in common, not just as Muslims and Christians, but what we have in common as followers of Abraham and of Noah and of Jesus and of Muhammad and of Moses, what we have in common, all of us, is each and every one of us have sensed that.